Well, this is a fun video. I'm excited to bring this one to you, especially excited because I fished a team tournament this weekend for the first time in over 20 years and caught 27-10 and won the doggone thing, and we won a new boat. How about that? So a bit of a dual purpose on this video. I'll put footage right here. This is the boat that we won. It's for sale, so if you're not interested in the boat, you can skip ahead about a minute and get into the video of how I caught him, talk about the fishing a little bit. If you are interested, it's a brand new boat. It's a Ranger Z518. It's the Cup equipped edition, so that's a little more loaded, has upgraded Garmin graphs and electronics, live scope, has the Garmin Force trolling motor. It's also upgraded to a tandem axle trailer. Pretty sharp looking boat, water ready, has a dual pro charger, so that's good for AGMs or lithiums, has a cranking battery in there already. The only thing it's missing, trolling motor batteries. I do know a guy that has Militech codes for 15 off there, and actually this weekend's Red Crush can get 20% off, but the boat's rigged, ready to go. We brought it home after the tournament, never been used, and just waiting for somebody to come and take it, go fishing with it. So yeah, I fished a lot of tournaments in the last couple decades. I started fishing full-time in 2004, was guiding on Lake Fork, qualified through the Toyota series and stuff for the FLW Tour at the time, which became the MLF Pro Circuit and Invitationals. But I've been fishing tournaments a lot, but with co-anglers or just observers with me, marshals. And a team tournament the last time I had was 2004 with my brother. And it was on a little local lake that he lives at, and the locals they knew him, and he had an aluminum boat, and they all said, "Hey man, why don't you come fish this thing?" And it's a Tuesday nighter, and we show up at the first one, and we actually won the first one. We said, "Hey, this is fun." We showed up to the next one, we got second place, and then I think like the next one we got like 10th or 12th place. Our luck ran out, and we didn't fish any more of them. It was fun to do that out of his. I mean, he had a little Starcraft, like a 16-foot tiny little aluminum with like a 50 horse motor or something like that. That was fun. But a long time since I fished a team tournament. Well, fast forward to this year, my brother's doing really well in the points, him and his partner Chad. And my brother had a wedding to go to this weekend out in Arizona. It's his boss's daughter, who he's worked with his boss for years and years, worked his way up the company, seen his daughter grow up, and they really wanted to come. So Dave's like, "Hey, we can sub somebody for one of them." I've really not fished Toledo Bend very much. I fished a Bass Open there like 2019, something like that. First time I fished it. Got 10th place in that. Actually had a pretty good event. Came back day 2. And my brothers fished down there a fair bit. I fished there just a couple other times. So we went back down there last weekend to pre-fish for it and actually did really well. Started off the day with a 10-pounder, was like about the first or second fish that we caught, and then kind of figured it out. And man, that was fun. We had on the scales, our best 5 were like 34 pounds, and there was a 374 boat tournament that weekend, a charity tournament that we should have gotten in. It took 27 pounds to win that, and even without the 10-pounder, like our best 5 were still 29 pounds. So it never works out though. So that was last weekend, and he's sick to his stomach because he's got to leave, and he can't fish. He's like, "Man, I want to fish it, man, I want to fish it." And then our buddy Chad, who was a guide customer of mine for years, took him a bunch of trips. And then we became friends, fished together a lot. When I started going down to Mexico to El Salto and Bacharach, places like that, and taking groups down there, he fished with me down there. And I think that's the last time we fished together. That's probably been like 15 years ago as well, or maybe I take it back. Actually, he used to fish co-angler on the FLW Tour as well, and he would practice with me. So it's probably been like 10 years since Chad and I fished. So anyway, fished a lot of tournaments, fished these guys, fished with them quite a bit, and Chad and I went running down there last weekend. So Friday was our official practice day. He wasn't able to make it down until the evening, and there were big storms. I actually hid underneath a boat dock. A tornado was a tornado warning just west of the lake. Actually, I saw there on tournament day, just south of housing there, it looked like that there were trees down in a front yard. I mean, obviously the storm came through there. Thankfully, I didn't hear of anyone hurt in that, but it was a wet and wild practice day, and caught a couple, and then it rained like 2 to 3 inches. So it went from water dropping and kind of being just stable conditions to all of a sudden like a flood hit. Now, come tournament day, it seemed like the weights were off. A lot of really good locals and regional pros and stuff, or even national pros. A lot of guys struggled, and we did too. It started off pretty quick. We had three like real fast, and thought, "Oh yeah, we're still on them, and then we're just gonna smoke them." And then it died, and it got to be a grind, and sat on three forever, and got to four, and sat on four forever, and really struggling having to grind them out. And it was one of those that had to go to just high percentage areas and just where we were catching fish pretty easily a week before, and even on that practice day, the day before, it became a grind on tournament day. But you had to be in those high percentage areas and having the confidence that, hey, this is the right type of water. That sooner or later you're going to connect with good ones, and they were staging areas. That was the key to all this. Was they were areas where we caught fat pre-spawn fish and kind of railed out skinnier, obvious post-spawn fish, and just those last spots where those big females, where they move in and out pretty quickly, and it seemed like this is where they went to feed or to stage on their way coming in and out. Now, over the years, I've fished Rayburn. Sam Rayburn's like right next to it. I fished that a ton, and it has a lot of grass. It's pretty wide open. It's easy to run around. A lot of national tournaments there. I've fished a lot of events there over the years, and they set up fairly similarly the way they fish. Rayburn just gets way more pressure and way easier to get around. A lot more tournaments. Toledo, I've only had a little bit of experience. It's kind of hard to navigate. You have to run boat channels through these cuts in the woods, so that makes it a little bit tougher. So it's a little intimidating, but the neat thing about Toledo, it's massive. Like, Sam Rayburn's big. Let's not joke around there. It's like 116,000 acres or something like that. Toledo Bend is 186,000 acres, if you're not familiar with it. It's like almost 90 miles from north to south. And when that baby gets rolling with a north wind or a south wind, I mean, it's rolling. And then there's these very narrow cut boat lanes out there through the woods that are like, a couple boat widths wide. You have to stay right on them. And when the winds come in and they zigzag and follow the old river channel or something, you can't just favor one bank and run the shoreline. You have to go out and stuff it through these waves. So it's, it can be intimidating. The nice thing when a lake's that big, though, the coves and stuff, there's so many of them, there's so many pockets that you can run a pattern. And that's what we figured out, not just a spot. And having spots are great, but those fish, they can just go wrong or other boats get on them. We kind of figured out a pattern, and that's how we're able to do well. And I'll dive into that. So without getting into specifics on the spots, we didn't fish one area of the lake. We covered a lot, actually, Louisiana and Texas side, pretty much the whole bottom half of the lake. And it was kind of specific type areas that you started to get a feel for. And with the mud coming in there, like I said, we had 2 to 3 inches of rain. So it came in there. There were areas in some creeks, in the backs of creeks, that were just blown out mud. There were other areas that didn't have as much runoff, and they were like gin clear, and the wind was blowing early, and overcast, so rainy. Then it got sunny and slick, and that was kind of spooky. The water it would have been great for sight fishing, but not for a moving bait. So it seemed like a key was if you get some stain mud, but just moderate. You want some watercolor, so you couldn't sight fish, but the fish are going to be less spooky, more aggressive. And places that are normally clear that turn muddy, that was kind of the key. That's what we really looked for. We ran around those areas, anywhere that it was normally clear, but it had muddied up just to a moderate amount, like a good looking stain or mud. Those fish were just more aggressive. We knew people couldn't be in there sight fishing, and those fish were going to be a little more active. Now the key element in this, and typically where you find the better fish, they want to obviously spawn in shallow water. Most of these fish, I'm assuming 6 feet or less. I'm sure some fish are spawning in 10 and do deeper, but the main population, the stuff we go for, it's shallow water fish. You see them on beds 2-4 feet, sometimes 6, but then the females are close by, but they're not necessarily up there in the shallows. They go up there to spawn, but to feed and to stage, they always like to hang out a little bit deeper. So basically we look for, if you get 10 feet of water, and maybe a little more, but usually you had to have that flat type area, the spawning area, and you had the deep water nearby, like that 10 foot, that's where the females were. And when you catch, there weren't a ton of fish, but those were key kind of areas. And if you rolled through them, it would be like, well, you might pick up one there and not catch any more, but you roll back again. If you're going to catch another one, it's going to be another female. So it's one that's moving on its way to spawn, or one that's spawn and moving it back out. So shallow water with deep water nearby, that was really the key. Now, the other key feature was a group of stumps. If you had a few stumps, so we're not talking about stobs, but there's all the lake's full of timber, but we're talking stumps, areas that were fairly shallow and had, I'm talking like waist sized up to like a small coffee table sort of big stumps, big tree stumps. And those ones, again, it was kind of stained, muddy water was the best. You couldn't see on the bottom to sight fish them. We're not talking 10-foot ones where you're scoping with a jerk bait. Talking about ones that are in anywhere from 1.5 feet, 2 feet deep, where it was muddy, you couldn't see the bottom, up to maybe like 4 feet deep, something like that. So what I would call shallow water stumps. And I'm sure you could sit there and scope them. I mean, I'm sure Drew Gill, Dakota Ebear, guys like that would have picked these things off with a Nico rig or drop shot and sit there, and they could see that big fish, tell you which one's a big one and not, and probably work them over. The thing was, on those, I was throwing the swim bait a little bit more, and I knew big ones around it. The nice thing about the swim bait, it's like they're either going to eat that bait or they're going to let it go. But you're going to know pretty quick. You don't have to sit there and recast everything. If there's 4 or 5 stumps out in this flat, I see this big dark spot, you throw it by it, you bring it by it, and it either breaks your arm or you just haul water. That's where later in the day, the Nessie got a kicker for us, and not lots of fish. But when you get around those stumps, when you know that you're looking for a big fish, that's where the swim bait's going to help trigger it. And I know a lot of you, I've got the high end, I've got Hinkle shads, all sorts of glide baits. In the spring, I do like the Nessie. The one nice thing about this, it's soft, so if they hit at it, sometimes they'll come back. Because those hard ones, they feel the hard sides. This is actually made with power bait baked in, so when they nip at it, sometimes they'll come back and then they'll get it. Whereas those hard ones, they hit that and it's see you later. The other thing, the Nessie does not sink very fast. If you're trying to get this thing down to a brush pile and say like 6, 8, 10, 20 feet below the surface, not gonna happen. But I fish it like you would like a fluke or a wacky rig, the jerk shads. Basically, I can twitch this thing instead of reeling it, and I'll do some of that, and it just gives that nice glide. You can kick it out. But what I like to do is twitch of the rod, and it's gonna make it kind of almost like a jerk bait, kind of move, or like a jerk shad, a fluke does. Instead of regular, it might go right 2 times, then go left once and turn out, and then just glides. And it's real smooth, and it's that soft body like that. It's not just like that dead look to it. It actually looks like a shad that's kind of swimming and just not doing too well. So that's the nice thing about a Nessie. You can just make it hang there a little bit more. And that's in the shallows, like if there's isolated weed clumps and stuff. We weren't doing this at Toledo Bend, but I've had some really good spring days, just areas where it's a little too muddy to know if there's to see beds there, but you just know that, man, this isolated weed clump, this single stump, this corner of a dock, when it's like 4 feet and less, you just twitch the Nessie around it. Same way you would if you throw a wacky worm there, if you twitch a fluke or a jerk shad through there, and you think you have a decent chance of catching a fish, well, the Nessie, if the female's there, instead of that stinking male coming up and being aggressive and grab it, he may come up there, but the female, if the one's there, you can get it. So I do like the Nessie in spring to catch that bonus big bite. And then in terms of catching numbers and stuff, hey, pre-spawn, bladed jigs, the chatterbaits, the Berkley Fritz side with, kind of the square bill, flat-sided crankbait, lipless crankbaits, square bills, all that stuff is spinner baits. They're great. What happens is the fish get pressure during the spawn, right? So all of a sudden they've seen so many. Brian Schmidt has won, I don't know how many how many events in grass and stuff. You get around grass and you get shallower. That's one of those staging areas, and they're chasing shad and stuff. The swim jig is just a more finesse bait. So that's really become a spring staple of mine. It's great for numbers. You get some smaller fish, you get bigger ones. But when everybody else is throwing those more mechanical type baits, like the crankbaits and the bladed jigs, the chatterbaits, square bills, all that sort of swim bait gets good, or the swim jig, gets good. This one, I use the Berkley swim jig, which is, it's a swim jig. The nice thing about it is it has the skirt with the power bait cooked into it, so I feel like that gives a little more scent and flavor. But the biggest thing I went to, this is what they call the drip swimmer. It's made for fishing on the back of a jig head minnow, scoping them out there. Well, instead of, a lot of guys use a grub trailer, a twin tail trailer, a big boot tail, like the skinny dippers and all the swim bait, the Kitex and the 3.8s and stuff. Everybody's throwing that. You see this has a tiny little boot tail, and like when my hand just twitches a little bit, that thing moves. You can crawl it so slowly that it's that boot tail still goes. So actually, you can see it. I did a whole video about a week ago on the swim jig, catching a whole bunch, showing you exactly how I fish it through the grass and stuff. And just crawling that thing, you can swim it so slowly that when they're staging around clumps of grass and stuff, that thing just, you crawl it along, and a chatterbait and stuff will plow through the grass and kind of break out. The swim jig, if there's a clump of grass, kind of just crawls over it and then falls back down those holes. And if there's a bed down there, if there's fish staging in those clean spots, if it's around brim beds that you're not aware of, the swim jig does really well. So swim jig, big player there. And thanks to the Nessie, a kicker bite, we had, I know one we weighed for big fish was a 711. That was the big one on the swimmer. And then also, I think we had another one that was probably about 7, and just 5 pretty solid fish there. So did a little bit of culling late in the day, but was not near as good as last week. But like I said, those key areas, when it's tough, you know that they're there. And then we kind of basically just ran our waypoints from practice and pre-practice, and went through those key areas and would pick up, instead of multiple fish in those key spots, pick up one there. It was enough to seal a deal. So one heck of a weekend. Appreciate you watching. Hopefully that helps you on your tournament or fishing trip coming up soon.